Without further ado, then we will go ahead and kick things off, and I will let these two do their own introductions, but I believe Mark is going to start us off. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
I'm Mark Baltes, and I have I'm proudly the representative of the North End Neighborhood Association and serve as its president. NENA, as it's known, because I'll be referring to our neighborhood association by its acronym. A little bit about myself. I'm a longtime Boise resident. I grew up on the bench and moved to the North End in the 1970s. And as we had started having children, we just moved farther and farther out west. And then finally, in 1995, we moved back to the North End, reestablished our roots. But when I returned to the North End in 1995 from living in West Boise, where I was active in my HOA, I had an understanding of how that worked. I discovered for the first time that we have neighborhood associations, and the North End Neighborhood Association was the one that represented my neighborhood. So I didn't know the difference, and before long was attending NENA meetings and found that there were these pressing issues that I was totally oblivious to up to that point. In those days, NENA had a notorious reputation for always fighting City Hall. So leadership was opposed to all foothills development, anything that would bring traffic through the North End. The neighborhood was also experiencing infill pressures, much like it is today. There were lots being split, tall, skinny houses were popping up all over the town, and demolition of old houses was threatening the historic character of the neighborhood. NENA leadership was changing. The new board that was coming in thought it was more effective to work perhaps with the city and the development community by recognizing and supporting good projects instead of opposing all projects. And I liked what I saw. And I thought, I'd really like to be part of this group that was trying to preserve my neighborhood. But I thought, what skills do I have to bring? I'm just a designer, I'm a historian, I'm an old house enthusiast. And I thought, well, I think I can bring something to the table. Perhaps if residents understood the history of the neighborhood and its unique architectural styles, maybe they would appreciate them a little bit more than just being old houses that need to be replaced. So it was sort of like, let's try preservation through education and appreciation. At that time, NENA didn't have a historic preservation committee. So I joined NENA, established one, and chaired it for a number of years. While others were fighting cut-through traffic and zoning issues and all of that kind of stuff, I immersed myself in learning the history of the neighborhood and sharing that history with the residents. We did programs, we taught seminars on how to research your homes, we created a North End historic poster, advocated for the designation of the entire neighborhood as a local historic district. So along the way, NENA partnered with all sorts of agencies and nonprofits, local historians, and forged lasting relationships with organizations such as Idaho State Historical Society, State Historic Preservation Office, Preservation Idaho, as well as the city's historic preservation planners. It was satisfying and it paid off. Through the years of doing research, conducting workshops, writing articles, attending countless meetings, some for fun, and testifying in dozens of public hearings, we were successful in getting the North End as well as 4 other historic districts created in 2004. So 20 years later, I'm still here. But reflecting on all of this, I came up with what I think are 5 basic elements of effective activism.
It might need to be turned on the side.
No, it's on.
You want to try the arrow on the keyboard?
The arrow on the keyboard.
Step 1, avoid technology.
Gosh, no kidding. No, it worked when she was here.
Need a notepad projector. Your team.
Sorry.
I used to be a teacher.
Oh, just click it on the left side. Sorry for
That
that'll work for me, sure.
Okay.
So, I don't have problems with paper copies. I'll just be holding up these things. So, the 5 words for effective 5 action words is what I call them. So, each of the following were illustrated in the story I just told you. And these principles are universal, but I've tailored them at the neighborhood and local community level. Okay, first word, motivation. This is, where do I start? And it starts right here. What is your personal call to action? Or what issue are you interested in? Are you mad as hell about something and you want to see a change? Or do you just have a great idea that would make your neighborhood a little bit better? And this is, how you can bring something to the table. What are you passionate about? The next one is activation. This is where you put your energy or your motive into action, how to channel that energy. You can go it alone, you can join an organization, or you can build your own. You can figure out where you fit in. Are you a leader? Are you a lieutenant? Or are you a foot soldier? But this is also the value of where neighborhood associations come in, because they're already established. So finding your place and just tying on to a neighborhood association is a good idea. It's an action that I took and found to be very rewarding. Neighborhood associations are really great for helping people find their voice in the community. They provide a valuable conduit to city government, city staff, and elected officials. You probably noticed from the elections yesterday, an awful lot of the city leaders have risen from the ranks of neighborhood associations. So they also provide a great opportunity to work with diverse people with shared values and concerns, establish relationships, and build communities. Neighborhood associations also have greater influence in speaking to an issue because they are recognized by the city as representative bodies of an entire neighborhood. As such, neighborhood associations get 15 minutes to present at a public hearing as opposed to 3 minutes each that an individual would get. There are 36 neighborhood associations in the city. Okay.
So if they all showed up,
number 3.
how long would it need to be? If they all showed up and got 15 minutes, how long would it be?
The mayor usually hammers them down, so it doesn't happen. Anyway, third one is education. So now that you've either decided to go it alone or join an organization or your neighborhood, this is where you want to immerse yourself in everything that you can about the issue that you're championing. You want to strive to become the authority on your own subject. So you want to understand laws, ordinance, comprehensive plan, get to know who the decision makers are and the policy makers. If it's a zoning or land use, it's the city. If it's streets and traffic, it's most likely ACHD. If it's a highway or if it's a school issue, it's the school district. And property taxes is a county responsibility. So a key component to the education here is developing the ability to speak knowledgeably and effectively and learn how to give effective testimony. Okay, collaboration. And this is the one I think is the most fun and the most rewarding. It's also the most effective. Identifying and reaching out to other organizations that have shared common values. This is where you can sort of leverage what you do as a neighborhood association, many times over just by, tying on with other organizations to speak with that common voice. It's an opportunity to build community, partnerships, and achieve common goals, and establish relationship with members of other neighborhood associations. NENA has, right now, we're kind of a sophisticated neighborhood. We're way beyond just doing historic preservation. We have no fewer than a dozen community partners, depending on the issue that we're trying to enforce or preserve. And number 5 is participation. This is probably the most important thing, and I can't emphasize that enough, because you have to show up. It's really all about personal relationships. And you need to be willing to spend the time And personal participation is probably the most important, because relationships aren't just between organizations, they're between people within those organizations. And so when you show up and you testify, you demonstrate, you write articles, you put a face on the issue. And I think that's one of the most important things that people can actually do, is put that human face on what this issue is. It's particularly important when giving testimony, when addressing an issue, speaking intelligently, knowing the issues, going back over your 5 points, and then but again, like I said, showing up and being willing to put in the time and go for the long game, which is be prepared for the long game. So the wheels of change turn very slowly, and you just have to know that going into it, so you don't get frustrated, so you don't get burned out, and but always remember, your voice matters. You're always bringing something of value into a new into an issue, and so. Yeah, know that you're valued and persevere. Thank you. I'll turn it over now to Cynthia Gibson.
Well, I'm a pacer. Can everybody hear me if I use this? No, can't. Okay, then I'll stand at the microphone.
There is a handheld if that's.
That's okay, I'll just stand here. Okay. My name is Cynthia Gibson. I'm with the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance. And let's see. I am going to talk to you tonight about working at the state level. So Mark talked about working with a neighborhood association and the local level with the city. I'm here to talk about at the state level. So I work for the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance. We are a statewide advocacy group. We have a staff of 1.5 based here in Boise, and our staff is here. I'm here because of the legislature and Idaho Transportation Department, and a lot of stakeholders are located in Boise. We have board members all around the state. We have 9 board members, and they live in communities throughout the state. And so I'm just going to dive into talking about working at the state level. So before I had this job, I often wondered about working at the state level and how effective that would be. And so a lot of people say, why do you even bother working at the state level? Well, there's a lot of reasons why we bother, and here's 4 right here. So we work in transportation. Our members' mission is to improve safety on our roads for people not in cars. So in other words, we're always trying to improve conditions for people who are walking and bicycling. That's our main focus, and that we focus a lot on children and seniors and vulnerable population. And these are 4 projects that happened last year. They're in 4 different communities. The top left is Cary, the top right is Idaho Falls, the bottom left is Moscow, and the bottom right is Burley. And those are 4 new sidewalks and crosswalks that were installed. There's a total of 26 of them that were installed because we were successful in getting $4 million committed to child safety. And so these are some of the projects that we were able to get. So that's why we do this. And I'm going to talk about the process tonight because I think there is some mystery to the process, and hopefully I can unearth some of that for you. So that's the State House, or our Capitol. My history with this building is interesting. I've lived in Idaho for 28 years. And the first 20 years, I never set foot inside that building because I thought it was full of a bunch of jerks. And I'm just being really honest with this small group. But I didn't know what went on there. I heard people talk. I lived in my bubble, right? You know, and everybody would say all these things and we'd read all this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's just a terrible place. I'm never going to set foot in there. And then I got my job and then I realized I had to go in there. And I was terrified of stepping foot into that building. And quickly realized it's not a bad place. It's really a lovely building. Architecturally, it's a beautiful place to be. Everybody's really nice. And we have great people like Sue Chu there who helped me out a ton in the building. And I appreciate Sue and Alana and all those great ladies. But there's also some really good people who are legislators who I don't agree with at all politically, but we just get along and we really like each other, and they've really helped us out a lot. And so we've been able to build partnerships. So if you've never been in the building and you'd like to go, I'd love to take you. And it's great to just go in there and sit in some committee meetings and watch them on the floor. It's a fascinating process. It's a very complicated process, but it's really cool. And you really can have an impact, I promise. So, okay. So how does the process work? Similar to what Mark said, if you have an idea, then that's where you start. And different people can bring ideas. It can be legislators, it can be an executive agency, a trade association, it can be a citizen. So whatever your idea is, you know, it's worth exploring. And for example, we just had an idea on vehicular manslaughter. We would like to see that changed. And so I contacted my legislators and I wrote to them all and I said, you know, this is something we'd like explored. And one of them said, yes, I'd love to meet with you. And I brought some attorneys with me. I'm not an attorney. And we sat and we had this conversation about this issue. And she is now meeting with other legislators to just kind of talk about it. So it's just an idea and we're exploring it. And that's how things get started. And it's worth doing that if you have an idea. So once you have this idea and you decide that you want to try to pull this bill together, you create something called a routing slip. And this is basically a discussion draft. It doesn't have a bill number yet. It's not public. But the idea is sort of formalized, and you work with your legislator, and they can get you permission to work with the staff up at the Capitol. They're the ones who have to write it. You want them to write it because they know how to write a bill. I don't know how to write a bill, and so you get this routing slip, which is basically a pre-bill kind of put together. Now your routing slip has to be heard before it becomes a bill. So it goes to a committee, goes to the germane committee. So I work in transportation. So our bills typically are run through the transportation committee. We've tried education. It hasn't really worked out well for us. So we really do focus on transportation. Whichever your committee is, that's where it would go. And this bill or this RS gets a print hearing in the committee. There's not a lot of deep discussion. There are a few questions that get asked, but it kind of gets discussed. And the goal is to get that routing slip turned into an actual bill. So that's what your goal is at that time. And they make a motion and then they vote on it. And if the committee decides, yes, let's create this bill and let's go forward with it, then the motion gets made and it then goes to becoming a bill. So now you have your bill and you have your bill number. And so for anybody who wants to advocate for an issue, this is really where you get started. This is where you can really say to your other advocates and your friends and your crew, you know what, we've got our bill, so it's going to be heard in our committee, whichever committee that is, and would you like to come testify? And would you like to contact the legislator? Help me out, help me get this bill passed. And this is where citizens can really become engaged. So the bill will then get a date set to be heard in committee, and hopefully it's far enough in advance that you can sort of rally your troops. And they do take public testimony at this point. So you can go in, you can talk, it gets discussed, lots of questions get asked, and your goal is to get the bill passed to the floor. They call it a do pass, recommend to the floor. So that's your goal at this point, is that you want it to continue on the process. they can also die in committee, and it happens all the time. So the steps I'm going to give to you, rarely do you get all the way through in the first year or two. We've been working on our bill, our main bill now for 4 years. And so we just continue working on it, and that's typical. Sarah?
Sorry, can I interrupt and ask a question?
Please.
Who, when you say bill is presented, who presents the bill? And when you say they ask questions, who answers the questions?
So that's a great question. So it depends. I have presented a bill as my bill, and then I answer all the questions that get asked of me. If you have a legislator can present a bill if they want to be your sponsor, and then they answer all the questions. If the person up there testifying cannot answer the questions, they might have somebody in the audience who they will bring up to answer your questions or answer the committee's questions. And the idea is to vet it through the committee, and the committee then feels comfortable passing it on to the floor. Okay. So now it goes to the floor, and this is where it's either all the House or all the senators. In the Senate, there's 35. In the House, there's 70. So you've got a lot of people now that you've got to influence. And this is, again, a great opportunity to engage your fellow advocates to have an impact. And you are not, as a citizen, don't go on the floor. Only the committee members are allowed to, or the House or Senate are allowed to be on the floor. So whoever is the bill sponsor at this point then stands up and they present their bill to the floor, and then it's debated. So there's pros and cons, and it's fascinating to watch if you've never seen it. You can sit up there and you can watch it. It's really interesting. They can also make amendments on the floor. They cannot make amendments in the committee. So if you want to make sure when your bill goes to committee, it's really good as far as what you want, because if it gets amended in committee, then it kind of goes into this other committee and it can kind of get lost. So you try not to do that. But it can be amended on the floor. And the goal here is to get majority vote. You just have to get a majority vote on the floor. And bills often die on the floor. They die in every step of this process. So then you do it. Yes.
Do you know why a bill dies in committee or in the on the floor? Do you?
You can hear that. It's all public. It's public process, so you can hear. You can attend all the committee meetings. You can attend the floor. You can hear the conversation. There's a lot of discussion. Your bill sponsor will have a better idea than you because they know the nuances. So you want to do your research and you want to find out why your bill died. That's a good question. It's really important to know what happened so that you can fix it, so that, if you try again, you know what to fix. So that's a great question. We call it Groundhog Day because if you get through one of the houses, then you have to repeat the process again in the other house. So if you start in the Senate, get all the way through the Senate, then you have to start all over again in the House and vice versa. And there is a time issue at the legislature. The clock is always ticking. They have cutoff dates for things. So you're always rushing to get things done before you hit the certain date to introduce a bill or I'm trying to think what other cutoff dates there are. The main thing is to get your bill introduced before a certain date because they don't want stuff lingering at the end or everything piled up. That's not to say that bills don't get introduced really late in the session that do get through. It's probably not going to be mine or one of yours. So those are a different animal. Sarah?
How do you know where you start, whether it's the House or the Senate side?
So you would work with the legislator on that. We typically start in the Senate just because we work with the senators so closely, and we are a little more challenged in the House in that particular committee. So we usually try to go through the Senate, build momentum, and then go to the House. Funding bills always start in the House. They never start in the Senate. Chances are you won't have a bill like that, but if you do, that's where you would start. And if you work with a House member, like if you worked with Sue and she was going to sponsor your bill, she'd take it to one of her committees and she'd start the process. And then you would take it and then you'd have to go find a sponsor in the Senate. So I don't know if I made that clear or not. Okay. And then the final action, and this is one that we sometimes overlook. The governor does have to sign off on bills. If he can also pass a bill by not signing it. So if he takes no action on it, it does become law. And he also can veto a bill. So you've got two opportunities to mobilize in each house. So 2 opportunities to mobilize in the Senate, 2 to mobilize in the House. And then we do also make sure that we send a lot of communication to the governor's office. We keep them abreast of what we're working on so that we're meeting with their transportation staff person, so he knows what bill is coming, and building our support from the governor, so that when the governor gets it on his desk, he's aware of what we're trying to accomplish, and he's heard about this. And so we hope that he will sign our bill when it gets there. The number of votes that happens to a bill through this process. So if all of the House supports a bill and all of the Senate supports a bill, the chances of the governor vetoing a bill or not signing, not wanting that bill to pass are pretty unlikely. He tends to follow the guidance of the House and Senate.
Not always, no, not always.
No, not all, you're right. Definitely not always. For an issue like what we have, he's probably going to. When it becomes a bigger issue like the grocery tax or some, Medicaid, those are bigger issues that we don't typically play around in too much. Oh, and legislative override, I did want to say this, that if the governor vetoes a bill, the legislature can override his vote by 2/3 majority. So there is always that chance of that happening also, though it doesn't happen very often. So you as advocates, how can you have an impact on all of this? And one thing I would recommend is aligning with an advocacy group. So if there's somebody out there who is, working like conservation, we do transportation, smart growth, there's these issues out there that these advocacy groups work in all the time. It's great to align yourselves with one of them. And advocacy training, Idaho Conservation League does do advocacy training. I don't know has anybody here been to it?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. The meeting ladies. Okay.
I highly recommend it. They do a good job.
They do a really good job. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And it will be in January this year. I don't think Jonathan has a date set just yet, but I recommend doing something like that. Those things are really good. Jonathan has a lot of experience. He really knows his way around the Capitol. And so, if you can glean some information from it, it's well worth it. Other ways that you can have an impact for your issue, you can write letters to the editor, you can write letters to the legislators, you can call them, you can email them. Different ones want to be contacted different ways. And I can't tell you the best way to contact certain legislators. You just have to kind of find that out. You can testify. Has anybody testified at the legislature?
Oh, yeah.
Of course you have. Okay.
Because they're meetings, we go.
That's right. You don't only go, you participate.
That's right.
That's great. I love that. So, public testimony, there's some rules to that too. And you can go on the website and you can find out what those rules are. But it's very formal and pretty nerve-wracking, but they're really nice people and they try to make you feel comfortable, and it's well worth it to go testify. People get up and they say some great things, and I highly recommend it. And then invite legislators to events. So like I said, we work at the state level and we do events like Walk to School Day, Bike to School Day. We do these different types of community activation events, and we're always inviting legislators to our events. Always, always, always. And our board members do the same thing in their communities. And many people think more at Mark's scale, like the local level. They think they can only have an impact at the local level. Why would I invite a legislator to Walk to School Day? There's a million reasons why you want to invite a legislator to Walk to School Day. And so invite them. Inviting them is 90% of it. Just invite them so they know that it's happening. They hear your name. They see what you're trying to accomplish. They're probably not going to show up, but they might. You never know. And we've had the most unusual legislators show up at things and they have a great time. We take them on bike rides. We take them for a walk audit, and they really enjoy it. So if you do an event locally, I would recommend inviting them, and invite your ACHD commissioners.
Right.
Legislative etiquette. So like I said, there are some rules. So one thing about the legislature is that things change rapidly there, and you see that a meeting is going to happen at 2 o'clock, and then something happens and oops, they're going to have the meeting at 1:30. At the end of the session, things get really chaotic because they get really busy trying to get things accomplished. Be early, just show up early and that's okay. And those rooms are comfortable and you can sit in the room for an hour. We do it all the time. Dress the part. They are dressed in coat and ties. If you want to be taken seriously, you dress the way they dress. And the way that you address the committees, you always address the committee through the chairman. So you always speak through the chairman. They won't get mad if you don't do that, but it is just a respectful way to talk to the chairman and the committee. So it's highly recommended. And then written testimony, if you bring written testimony, then you just give it to the secretary and they really appreciate that. And your written testimony gets put on record. Just some final thoughts. So if you want to explore the legislature some more and what's going on, that's the website, legislature.idaho.gov. There's a lot of great information there. There's calendars of when things are happening. There's, legislators on committees. I think this is the most important thing. Campaigns can take years. And so like Mark said, you just really have to be patient. And you're in it for the long haul. And the chances are really good your bill's not going to get through the first year, probably not the second or third year. You're just going to get better at it. You're just going to get more focused.
I think their website's wrong.
The what?
The legislature, idaho.gov. I think it's the other way around. Is it Idaho legislature?
.gov, legislature.idaho.gov?
I think it's Idaho. We don't know. We'll look it up.
Yeah, look it up and let me know. I'm pretty sure that's it, but I could be wrong, very likely. And unlikely partners, we're now partnering with truckers and loggers, even though we're dealing with children, because they are concerned about their trucks could run over a child in a rural Idaho community, and that's awful. So we are more and more trying to partner with these organizations we never thought of before, and they're powerful and they help us out. And then celebrate small wins. Mark mentioned this. We celebrate every single tiny, tiny little win, because sometimes that's all we have. And we celebrate the daylights out of things. So just keep doing that. It'll make you feel better. That's it. That's all I have. Yes. Oops.
So when you were talking about written testimony, I've seen some people where they have their prepared statement and they read it, but then they have supplemental information that doesn't fit within the 3 minutes or whatever, and they say, I also have blah, blah. And so they're saying out loud so everyone in the room knows there's this extra information, and then the committee often says, we'll take that too. Is that well received? Is that a good idea?
I would do that.
Okay.
I would do that. I would get that information because that goes to the legislators and they typically will read that, and that's just more information for them. Yeah, Sue?
I like that idea. What works even better is before the committee, get it to the secretary, and then she'll get it to us, because that way we can actually have read it before we get there. It helps a lot.
Like that day or ahead of time? Like
Ahead of time.
Before that day?
Give her enough time to photocopy it and put it in our things, or put it electronically if we're reading by internet.
How do you know you're going to be scheduled for your bill to come up? It's
You
all-
watch the calendar.
Oh, no, okay, so no one specifically contacts you and says, be here.
No, your bill sponsor might, your legislator, that's why you want to have, you have to work with people in the building who are in the process. It can be hard, and so you have to really watch it very carefully. You have to learn the language, you have to understand the process, and you have to rely on your friends in the State House to help you with it. Because, so my feeling is that the process is tricky for citizens, and the only way you're going to have success is to work with people who understand the process. That's, yeah.
So what drives you to do this?
Oh, gosh, I love what I don't know, I love what I do, and I see it making a difference, and we're having a great impact, and it's so needed in our state. I mean, I don't know if you know, a 72-year-old woman just died yesterday here in Boise, and a week ago, a 16-year-old, just died. And so what we see is these vulnerable, it's the very old and the very young, are dying on our roads. Pedestrian deaths are at an all-time high. Over 6,000 people die every year walking on our streets and are hit by a car. And in Idaho, 2018 data just came out, 19 Idahoans were walking and were hit and killed by a car in 2018. 19 families torn apart. And then you've got the people who hit them. So that's another 19 families torn apart. And so I just totally believe in what I do, and I think we need change and on a big scale, and we need things to really change, and we're just scratching the surface. Sarah?
So you work with the Transportation Committee.
Yes.
How often is there turnover within that committee? Are you able to build relationships with them, or does it change frequently, or how does that work?
We've been pretty lucky. Those committees have remained fairly stable. Joe Palmer is the chairman in the House, and we thought we were going to lose him last night, but he's remaining, which is actually good. It's actually good for us.
We're happy.
I can't believe I'm saying that. But we are happy that he's staying because we've been working with him now for 4 years. And then the chairman of the Senate committee is retiring after this year, and we're heartbroken. He has been a huge supporter of ours and worked really closely with us. So, but the committee members are pretty stable. We've been fortunate. They've been pretty stable. But change can happen. And you know what? We stay steady on what we're trying to accomplish, and the change happens around us, and we have to just adapt to that. So it's just the nature of the beast.
So what's your organization's position on texting while biking?
So we think
While
if
biking
you,
or driving? No, I've seen people in the intersections on their bikes looking at their phone, not as driving and riding. I couldn't do that.
so I think it's stupid. I think it's a stupid thing to do, but you're not going to kill somebody doing that like you could in your car. So do I think it's dumb? Absolutely. Do I think it's dumb to ride without a helmet? Absolutely. But I don't think that we should legislate wearing helmets.
Well, you may not kill somebody, but you might be more likely to get yourself killed
Yes, you might.
from not.
And that's why you
letting
shouldn't
them
do
go.
it. Yes, I do not think, but I don't think we should legislate that. I think that's the wrong target.
But you're in the roads, you're traffic, you're in the road.
Yes, you are. And so, yeah, so cyclists, you know, we all pay for the roads. Cyclists pay for the roads. They have just as much right to be there riding their bicycle as somebody in a motor vehicle. And if they exhibit bad behavior that can hurt or kill them, I think that that's a stupid thing to do. But I don't think we should have a law. I think that's targeting the victim instead of targeting the real issue.
Distracted driving, regardless, you're on the road in a moving vehicle, whether it's a pedal one or whether it's a.
I think we need to target motorists who are texting first. I think that should be a good focus for us right now. So hopefully we'll see that bill come back.
I don't know, you wanna be on the road, here's your rules.
I agree with you. I can't even text I can't text when I ride my bicycle. I really don't know how people do that, to be perfectly honest. Yes.
I just wanted to mention that the vast majority of legislative hearings are actually aired on the internet over over TV.
Yep.
And if it's not something where you have to actually testify, you can sit there in the comfort of your living room and watch it, and
then you can say all the swear words you want.
yeah, you can like throw things. It's cool. So that's really handy. And the Idaho legislature is actually very open about these things compared to a lot of states. So, and the other thing too is if you're worried about what does it look like to go to a hearing and how do you testify and things like that, you can watch on TV and see how other people do it.
Yeah, they do a great job. I agree with you. And you can hear it really well too. It's really pretty good. They do a nice job with that. So, yep, you can tune in at the comfort of your desk or wherever you happen to be. Yeah, are those recorded? It's recorded too,
Yes.
right, Sue? Yeah.
So you can watch it after?
Yeah.
Not all committees.
You have to
Some are just
download
audio.
it first and then you watch it, and they are huge.
Huge files.
Yes.
Some are just audio, some are audio
Yeah.
and video, depending on the committee.
Did you have a question?
I do, but it's for Mark.
Mark, come on up.
Charge you to do this, Mark.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we were talking about with neighborhood associations and relationships with shared values, and I know there's a couple of us in the room who are very interested in affordable housing and homeless issues and so forth. What kind of conversations in neighborhood associations really bring people together? I know sometimes there's that not in my backyard part of the conversation. So what are the shared values that can help bring people more toward affordability and diversity and so forth?
Well, there's no simple answer to that, to a complicated problem.
Yeah.
And our neighborhood association has been supportive of the expanded housing initiative that the city's put out. And we see the value in ADUs, accessory dwellings and all of that. We have a soft spot for some zoning that allows for more maybe duplexes and fourplexes in an R1 zone, but that hasn't gone that direction yet because, again, we are more supportive of density than sprawl. We see the value of putting that in. Recently, we tried to be proactive when the Booth home was being sold and the property was going to be developed. We took it upon ourselves, without the assistance of the Salvation Army, to do a mini charrette with Idaho Smart Growth to see what the neighbors would support on that whole block within our neighborhood. We wanted the preservation element to prevail, the original 1921 building, but then we knew that a lot of that would be demolished, and what might that housing component look like? So I think looking back on it, it was sort of a missed opportunity from the standpoint of the developer. There were allowed like maybe 14 units for that parcel. And he only built 13, and we would have supported maybe as many as 17 if we could have got past the parking thing, because parking seems to be the biggest. The zoning for parking, the requirement for parking is really gets in the way of a lot of what we, good housing opportunities and stuff. So we're supportive of that. We take and invest our resources in exploring opportunities like that. We're doing the same thing with Block 75 as the Cathedral of the Rockies is considering something down the road for that. So we're not saying yes housing or yes open space or whatever, but we're trying to have those conversations proactively so we're not having to respond to something after the fact. And so, that's what we're doing leadership-wise. As far as affordable housing, it's so market driven. I don't have an answer for how that works, especially in our neighborhood where costs are just exorbitant. One thing that we have done though is that we've partnered with the Jesse Tree organization, and that's eviction prevention. So they came and they did a presentation to our board, and we were very receptive to that. We weren't familiar with the organization at all, and so we established a dedicated fund that we're going to fund every year, that money can be used to keep people from becoming homeless within our neighborhood. And we're trying to use that as a pilot program to inspire other organizations or churches or neighborhoods or whatever to do the same thing. So we can't do it citywide with our finite resources, but we can certainly start within the boundaries of our neighborhood and work our way outward. It costs like $800 or something to get somebody caught up on their rent. And of course, there's criteria that they have to have a job, and they have to meet sorts of things to qualify within Jesse Tree. But if that person or that family can remain in their home, ultimately it would save something like $20,000, which it would take to find that person new housing after they've had an eviction, because they've got, it's like a bankruptcy, and now they can't find housing. So small money up front to keep people in place, and that's what we're trying to do as a neighborhood.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's
okay,
great.
Welcome.
I had a question for you too, and it's kind of like a bit out of it's not really about planning, but since you're here. You had mentioned that a whole lot of leaders come from the North End, and I gather that some people have issues with this, and they're talking about putting forth state legislation that would require districts and that people be able to come from different districts and stuff. And I was just wondering how you guys were planning to deal with that.
Well, I think 5 of the city officials, I think the only one that doesn't come from the north or the east end is T.J. Thompson, and I think he comes from the West Bench or something. So I don't support the idea of districting, because I think, as the discussion was brought up, how is it that boundaries would be drawn? And if we've got 6 city council people, does that mean we have 6 districts? Or if we had 3 districts and we had 2 each, or if we had 4 districts and we had some at large? I mean, there's a lot of things that could be explored that might be an improvement to what we have. I guess I support I like the idea that a lot of them come from our neighborhood, because they've, like I said, I think 4 of them have grown through the North End Neighborhood Association, and so that gives us some level of familiarity, but it's not fair to other areas of town. But we've sort of earned it in the sense that District 19 and our neighborhood and the East End have the highest voter turnout. So, it just kind of goes that direction. I mean, I would like to see, it would be nice if things were a little more dispersed. And I don't remember where everybody came from in this current election, but I think we may have gotten some people from outside of the area now. Didn't work that way?
Not that I've heard. I mean, I'm not from Boise, so that's
okay,
not what I
okay.
heard.
So, anyway. Yes, Sarah.
So one of the things that Cynthia mentioned was the idea of building relationships and sort of educating yourself on who is the right point person to talk about things with. So from my own experience with the neighborhood association, because we're all volunteers, there's turnover with the board members. And I don't know if it's the same for NENA, if you guys maybe have longer standing board members, but how do you continue to have a relationship with the appropriate people, like for example at ACHD, when your organization or your board is, fluctuating through different volunteers?
Well, we have the benefit of a lot of institutional memory. Like I said, I've been on our board for 20 years. I'm only been president for just the last 2. I never aspired to be president. It was just sort of, it just happened. And so, but we enjoy more longevity on our board than I think most neighborhood associations have. I think part of that's due to the fact that I think our burnout rate is less. I mean, we have Hyde Park Street Fair, so we have a revenue stream. So we're not always out there trying to chase money in order to get something done. The neighborhood is stable, so a lot of our residents are, stay in place. We don't have a lot of people that are moving, in and out of the neighborhood. So keeping a good volunteer organization in place is a huge challenge. It's always addressed by the energized neighborhoods. I think it's one of their workshops is how do you attract and then how do you retain good volunteers. So it's something that we're always going to struggle with. And again, I think it's almost expected that you're going to have to build new personal relationships maybe every 3 years with these agencies as your officers come and go and people enter the board. The value of institutional memory and some of that is introductions that are made by outgoing people to incoming people and that familiarity. Good communication. We have a really good newsletter. So, putting that information out there. Part of it is familiarity just with the organization. So NENA doesn't need a lot of introductions as to who we are. So it's a little bit easier for an incoming board person to step into that role and be recognized and taken seriously. So it does have its benefits just from the longevity of the organization. Is that
Yeah.
okay? Yes.
How often does your newsletter go out, and is it a paper, do you mail it, or is it online? How do you disperse it?
It comes out quarterly.
Okay.
And we print 5,000 copies, and they're distributed door to door within the boundaries of our neighborhood. We have 50-some people that do that. We also post it online, so we have a tech person and a social media person, and so she does postings, and we have it on our website. It's also archived at Boise State Archive, and so back issues and stuff can be viewed, and I think those links are on our website to look back to old issues. The North End News goes back to 1977 when our neighborhood started, so, which is interesting to see because you see that we're fighting the same development issues 40 years later as we were, and sometimes with exactly the same developer.
Yeah.
So it's
So those are archived at the state?
at the Boise State, at
Boise
Boise State Library, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they have our archive. All of our documents and stuff are all archived at BSU as well.
And where does all your funding come from?
Most of our funding comes from the revenue from the Hyde Park Street Fair.
Oh, shit.
And then we have a couple of fundraisers that we do. We have a garden tour that we've just put in place last year again. We had it in 2001, and then it sort of took a hiatus. We lost it when we lost volunteers, so it came back. The revenue for the garden tour, which is not large, but it pays for the plantings and the maintenance of our 15th Street traffic projects. And then we have a holiday home tour, again, which raises, again, a small amount of money. This will be our third annual, and it will raise money for our Jesse Tree account, our dedicated Jesse Tree account.
How many residents do you have in your, is it 5,000? Is that what you said?
We have like 5,500 homes. I think we have a population of almost 11,000.
Okay.
How do you know that off the top of your head?
Because we just got the thing from the city. Well, we're doing our neighborhood plan.
Okay.
So they were just digging up information, demographics. It's interesting, as expensive as the North End is, its median income is less than the city as a whole. So it probably has to do with aging population and things like that. So what was the thing that just came out? They just...
Oh, yeah, I just saw that.
Did you just see that? I can't remember what it was just called, but we reviewed it at our neighborhood plan meeting. And you can bring up every neighborhood, and it'll give you all of the demographics, the number of households, median income, and compare it to the city and all that kind of stuff. So the energize your neighborhoods or the grow your housing thing, I get those two things mixed up, but they do a really, really good job of keeping neighborhoods informed on the demographics, making sure that we're actually representing the people that we say that we are. Okay.
What drives you to do this?
Well, I'm just like Cynthia. I really enjoy what I do. I see that we make a difference in the things that we accomplish. We do accomplish things. Like I said, just when in my little intro piece, when we first started taking advocacy to get the neighborhoods established as a historic district, I think was huge, because then we don't have a lot of those developmental pressures that Vista and the Bench and the university are having, because they're not protected with design guidelines and certain ordinances. So just that step in itself, and the years that it took us to get that in place, has been rewarding. And then we can, again, do what we can do on traffic issues. Similar, I mean, you're doing a pilot program on 8th and 9th to try to slow traffic down. We're always going to be dealing with numbers of cars and the speeds that those cars go through our neighborhood. So when we can see a successful pilot program, and then we can see ACHD stepping up and saying, well, this is a good idea, and implement that thing, and now our neighborhood's a little bit safer than it was before. Those are all those little victories that we celebrate along the way. So, and there's a lot of satisfaction that goes along with those things.
I have a question right along that, actually. How do you, as a neighborhood association, because you mentioned that you get additional time to do testimony. How do you, as a neighborhood association, determine when you're going to assert your neighborhood association power and testify on a particular ACHD thing or a zoning thing, anything like that?
Well, it's partially in response to, it's sort of like leading from behind. So you get this groundswell of residents that have, you know, that come forth and say, this is something that we really need to take, you know, to take care of. There's a foothills development called Erie Terraces or something now, which again threatens to impact not only that neighborhood in the foothills, but then all of the downstream traffic that's going to be generated. So you've got all of your neighbors on Harrison Boulevard and 15th Street and 8th and everything that all could potentially be hit by that. So we, as a neighborhood association leadership thing, we pay attention to those things, and then we align ourselves with them. We oftentimes, and in the case of that Erie Terraces, we wrote letters of support. Some of our board people did go and testify. We're not the neighborhood association of record. They are, so we only got like 3 minutes or something like that, I think, on that particular thing. But it's usually the pressure from the neighborhood as a whole which determines whether or not we're going to go out there in force and do something like that. And testify and take our 15 minutes, line all our people up behind it 3 minutes each, you know, that kind of thing. So
Related to that, how do you quantify the metrics of your residents, how they feel? I mean, are they very vocal? They bombard you guys with their opinions, or do you have to have a meeting prior to giving testimony and let everybody in the neighborhood have their say about the position they want you to take?
And we're real conscious of that. So we want to make sure that we are speaking for the benefit of the entire neighborhood. So that's why we do have a stipend person who does our social media, and so we get a little bit of feedback from what we get by posting issues and hearing what their responses are. Same thing with our newsletters. Communication. We have our membership, or our attendance at our meetings is just shameful. It's shamefully bad. It's horrible. So in a neighborhood that has all of these things going for it, and somebody will want to come and present thinking that they're going to be presenting to a broad group of neighbors, or speaking to the board and 7 people. Yeah. And I always let them know in advance. So that part is a real challenge. Again, as we're getting ready to do our neighborhood plan, this is a huge opportunity to survey and get a lot of outreach to get to those people. But then again, it's incumbent upon them to give us that feedback. And so many times, and we all know that in this room, people bitch after the fact. They had an opportunity to come forth, and we try to put all that stuff out there timely like everybody else, but
we get there.
You got to let us know.
We do that up front, not at the end.
Okay.
Because we go to meetings.
Because you go to meetings, yeah. Come to ours, Anyway.
Well, I don't live in the North End.
You don't have to. You can just come and listen to what we have to talk about. Ours are 2-hour meetings, so we can keep you entertained for 2 hours.
Well, along that, a more serious note, do these other 36 of the 36 other neighborhood associations, do any ever come to your meetings to find out hints on how to run theirs better, or?
On occasion, we will get somebody that does come over. And out of the 36 neighborhood associations, I think maybe 12 of them are defunct and actually have they're recognized, they're established, but they don't really have leadership or anything, and so they're inactive. So, anyway.
So
Any
now
other questions?
we want to go develop, go develop there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to make it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I have something very quick that I would like to just share with all of you. Mark touched upon it briefly, and again, I do transportation. You're not all here for transportation, but I'd like to invite you to come down to 8th and 9th Streets in the North End, where Longfellow School is. We've put up temporary traffic calming there. Our organization received a grant from AARP for community livability. And if you're interested in doing any traffic calming in your neighborhood, we have equipment that we loan out to you. And so it's up right now. My deal with ACHD is that it's going to come down tomorrow. I'm going to negotiate that pretty hard to see if I can leave it up longer. We've been checking speeds of cars. We've noticed cars have slowed down. And we've been watching to see those kids cross that street. So I don't know if you all know what a bulb out is or a curb extension. We've used straw wattling. They use it for landscaping. It's about this round, and it's basically straw in a net. It's very temporary. But we brought the curb out about 7 feet on these two streets from end to end. So we basically shortened the distance. Kids have to cross the street by between 14 and 15 feet, and then we put cones out. So I'm just offering that to you. I have a thing if you want to take something with you tonight. But again, we had this grant and we want to loan it to communities. So if you want to do something like that in your neighborhood, you don't have to live in the North End. You can live wherever you want. You don't even have to live in Boise. And we would love to loan this equipment out and help you do something like that. So I just wanted to let you all know. Thank you.
Round of applause for